Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here tonight with you all. Thank you all for coming along to our first lecture here at Woodville for the year of 2026. And I hope all of your holiday periods have been filled with family and friends and that you're all ready to jump into the next year. Now, tonight is going to be a night of questions. It's going to be a night of reflection, a night of looking forward. But our first question we pose to those of you who are here, you might have been coming to this place to hear the Bible many times before, or this might be your first time. Our first question is, why do Christadelphians hold these lectures? Why do we hold this event, this presentation from the Bible, here tonight and every Sunday night, bar a few each year? See, Christadelphian lectures are not for entertainment, and they're not designed as motivational talks. If you look back at our subjects from previous years, you'd see that our subjects are not what you might quote as entertaining. No, our lectures exist for three main reasons. They exist to proclaim the gospel, to encourage spirituality, and as a call to reflection. And through these lectures each year, we hope to proclaim the gospel. See, God has good news for the future. He has a plan. He has a design for you and me, and we want everyone to come to God and to grow in a relationship with Him through the Bible. They exist to encourage. Many of us here might already believe in the Bible or be growing towards a belief in the Bible, but even if you don't, God's words are encouraging. They give us hope. They give us strength. They help us feel like we can continue through the tough times of our life. And finally, they act as a call to reflection, because these lectures are not just for information and encouragement. They are to encourage self-reflection. Understanding God really requires an understanding of self. These lectures are designed to look into ourselves, into our society, and to see where we can change for the better. And what better time to change and to reflect than in the first lecture of the new year. This time of the year naturally invites reassessment and redirection. And exactly like it says in verse 14 of our reading tonight in Ephesians chapter 5, lectures help us to wake up spiritually, to open our eyes, and to look at the things around us and the things presented in the Bible and take the time to consider what they mean and what actions we should be taking from them. And at this time of the year, people everywhere pause and reassess and ask themselves, what's next? What was my year like? What did I do well? What did I do not so well? We as humans around the world take this time to reflect on our health. How did we eat in the last year? How did we exercise? What different health crises may we have had? We reflect on our work, what we did in the last year, what we may have accomplished, maybe how we learnt and we grew. We reflect on our relationships. We might have made some new friends. We might have lost some old friends. We may have reached some significant milestones with loved ones, or we might have had some special anniversaries. And we reflect on finances, how we may have saved, how we might have spent. What did we spend our money on? What didn't we buy? What did we want to buy? And at this point in each year, these reflections are really valuable. We'll touch more on them shortly. But we might, in these reflections and plannings for the year ahead, we might not stop to consider the question of why. Of course, we might have a why for each of those things, like we might be saving money to buy a house or looking to get a promotion, but ultimately, why? Is there a greater reason for it all? Is there something deeper that should shape all of those things? And of course, there is. There is a greater why for all of those things, and you can find it right here in the Bible. You see, the Bible, despite being an ancient book, It speaks to each of us directly. It speaks to each of us how we live our lives and how we use our time. And time is the real reason for all these reflections and all these New Year's resolutions. If everyone had infinite time, it wouldn't really matter to plan for the year ahead or to change too much, because ultimately you wouldn't be losing anything if it turned out to be a mistake. But we don't have infinite time. We all know that. In the words of one Theophrastus, a student of Plato in ancient Greece, time is the most valuable thing that a man can spend. Time is unchanging. It's unstoppable and it's uncontrollable. And we have limited time, so limited that we don't even know how much more we each have. And as I said, God, through his words in the Bible, he teaches us to invest our time. The prophet Moses wrote one of the Psalms in Psalm 90. And his premise of this psalm was that God created the whole earth, and he's existed for eternity. But we humans are so small. We do all the things that we think are important without thinking about how long our lives really are. And in Psalm 90, Moses says, "The days of our years are 70 years and 10, or 70 years on average. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, if you manage to get to 80 yet, is their strength labour and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away." And then in verse 12 he says, "So teach us, God, to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom." Moses says that we need to number our days, to note that we do only have so little time. And he says that in what little time we have, we need to apply our hearts unto wisdom, which we'll be looking at a lot more later tonight. So the Bible agrees, our time is valuable, and we need to number it and use it in the right way. The Bible invites us to wake up to the value of our time, especially at moments like this at the start of the year, when we plan ahead. How then are we going to look at our subject? Redeeming the time, how should we spend the year ahead? Well, as we've just been thinking over, we need to first start by looking back, by reflecting. Once we've done that, we're going to then look at the concept of New Year's resolutions. Thirdly, we'll be looking at why most resolutions fail, and if they fail. Fourthly, we'll be seeing what does the Bible mean by redeeming the time, as the title of our lecture suggests. And finally, we'll be looking at a different kind of New Year's resolution, one that can be found in the Bible. And through these concepts, our goal will be to leave here tonight feeling like we can make this year something new, a better year than in past years, directly by looking at words of the Bible, because ultimately that is our goal here. This lecture isn't about telling us where we're failing. It's about the Bible offering us something worth building a year around and worth our lives being centered around. So, looking back, Haggai 1 verse 5 says, "Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways." God, through the Old Testament prophet Haggai, commands his people at the time to do one thing, to consider their ways, specifically whether their ways were good or bad, whether they'd done what God had asked them to do, or whether they had not. And this same principle we can latch onto today. This principle of considering our ways is one that we can still find use of, despite these words being written so long ago. Let's then begin, like we've said, by looking back. Let's follow the request of God in Haggai to reflect and to consider our ways. Now, our reflection here is designed as just that, reflection, not regret. We aren't reflecting for sentimental reasons, but to understand where we can go from here. So with that in mind, remember that whether you learn from the past or not, it'll be mainly you that's affected, whether positively or negatively. Now, in looking back over this past year, I'm sure you all, just as I, feel like time's moved faster than we expect. The days truly are long, but the years are short. And looking back over this last year of 2025, you may feel like you reacted to your life rather than chose it. How many of the circumstances that you went through were choices compared to reactions to things beyond your control? Now, of course, life can't really be planned. There are so many unexpected things that occur, but how many of you could say that you were prepared for everything that this year threw at you? I would like you all, if you can, to just take a moment to answer yourselves some questions about the last year. I'd love it if you could pull out a piece of paper or a pen or the notes app of your phone. And just as I ask some questions, do as God asks and consider your ways. Consider the year in the past. Now, these aren't for anyone else to see. This is just for you. But honest reflection is the starting point to looking forward and moving towards positive change. The first question then, in the past year, what took most of your time? It could be a thing, an activity, a pursuit, a group, a relationship, or an endeavour. A second of three. In the past year, what gave you the most satisfaction? You can list a few. They could be activities, they could be hobbies, they could be pursuits, they could be relationships. And finally, in the past year, what did you do that felt repetitive? And not just was repetitive, me taking the bus into work was repetitive, and it certainly felt repetitive as well, but what felt repetitive with no real difference? What felt like you were simply doing again and again, but not getting anywhere with it? Take the time to honestly reflect on these simple things. Now, this, of course, is a religious lecture. This is based on the Bible. And those answers don't necessarily need to be religiously based answers, just simply honest answers. Now, one thing that I found when doing this exercise was that my year was very busy. I did a lot of things last year. I got up to a lot of stuff. But just as time moves very fast, the things and stuff that we do with our time often feels very unfulfilling. Busyness does not equal fulfillment. Being constantly busy doesn't mean your life is inherently better. And this sense of busyness without fulfillment is something the Bible speaks about very directly. See, in another part of the Bible, in a short letter called James, the writer describes the rhythm of ordinary life, making plans, working, moving from place to place, trying to build something worthwhile. He puts it like this: today or tomorrow we'll go into such a city and continue there a year and buy and sell and get gain. And then he moves on, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapour or a mist, a drop of water that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. And the point here is not that planning is wrong or that work is pointless. It's that life on its own is fragile and uncertain. We can be very busy, we can be very productive and still not really know where everything's heading. Most of us have felt that, doing the right things, yet still asking, is this all there is? And the Bible comes back to this idea again and again. In the book of Proverbs, it captures it in just one simple sentence. There is a way which seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. In other words, we can sincerely try to live well, to build a good life, to make sensible choices, and still find out that without a bigger picture, life remains limited. It still ends in the same way as anyone else. Achievement, activity, and success don't change that. And this is why reflection matters. When we look back in the year filled with activity, the Bible gently pushes us to ask a deeper question, not just was I busy and what did I do, but was I moving towards something that truly lasts? That question is uncomfortable, but it's also hopeful. Because if life feels busy but unfulfilling, the Bible isn't saying try harder, do more. It's saying that there may be more to life than what you might have been aiming for. And of course, this brings us back to our next section, which we want to now look at, of the concept of New Year's resolutions. People reflect, people plan. That's when this usually happens, in the new year. And this concept of New Year's resolutions, I think, is an excellent one. For 2025, last year, a small group of my friends got together and made a shared online note in which we put down each 3 written goals that we wanted to achieve in the year or work on. Now, having these goals written allowed us to be accountable to each other and help each other towards the goals which we had set. And these resolutions highlighted to me that everyone is striving towards improvement, despite how good they may seem on the outside. New Year's resolutions reflect hope. They show a level of self-awareness, the innate feeling of dissatisfaction with the stagnation of life. On that note, I don't think I ended up achieving any of my New Year's resolutions that I wrote down, but that's not the point. The point was that making those goals and writing them down, that wanting to change and wanting to improve is not a bad thing. It's a good thing to do, and there's value in it, even if you don't achieve the goal. And so we make New Year's resolutions. We reflect as we have, and then we look forward to change. The most common New Year's resolutions that I could find could be broken down into the following categories. I'm not sure how universities research this, because they don't ask everyone. I know I wasn't asked when they did this study. But the 4 that they say are the most common New Year's resolutions are physical, mental, emotional, relational, or success-oriented New Year's resolutions. So these things like health, fitness, weight, stress, family, friends, money, career, all of those different things. And these resolutions are not wrong. They are often quite beneficial. They provide positive change to your life. But even if you don't achieve them, your life might improve marginally. But they do just that. They focus on things in this life. These resolutions, they are time-bound. They are temporary. Now, temporary benefit is better than no benefit at all, granted. But none of these changes are bound to make lifelong differences. And this focus on the future, this desire to improve, to build something better, is, again, something the Bible recognizes. Ecclesiastes, another book in the Bible, was written by King Solomon. And he wrote these observations in Ecclesiastes, these observations about life. And he reflected on the human experience, and he had something to comment on this same feeling. He, God, hath made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he hath set eternity in their heart. Our lives are often beautiful. We look around, we have ups and downs, and of course, but this passage is saying that God has made the world, and he's made everything beautiful in its time, life. Yet, he's also set eternity in the hearts of mankind. Have you ever looked forward, far ahead into the future, and just wondered? Humanity forever has looked far ahead of them and imagined what is going to happen in the future. This is the feeling of eternity in our hearts. And it's an interesting phrase, eternity in their heart. It suggests that even when life is good, even when things are going well, people still sense that something might be missing. We enjoy moments, achievements, relationships, and yet they never quite feel permanent enough. There's always the sense that time is slipping through our fingers. That helps explain why our goals so often look forward, but only a little way ahead. We aim for a better year, a healthier body, less stress, stronger relationships. And all of those things matter, but they still sit within the limits of time. They don't really answer the deeper question of how long or to what end. Jesus Christ, also speaking on the human desire to plan and prepare for the future, has something to say on the matter. Speaking to ordinary people about everyday priorities, he said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And his point isn't that planning or work or improvement, his point isn't that those things are wrong. It's that when everything we aim for is temporary, it will disappoint us. Time will wear it down. Circumstances will undo it. And we find ourselves starting the same cycle again next year. And that brings us to an important question. If our desire to improve is real and even good, why do so many New Year's resolutions struggle to last? Why do they fade, stall, or leave us feeling unchanged? And to answer that, we need to look a little bit more closely at what we're aiming for and why. Most New Year's resolutions do ultimately fade. Not only do most of them fade, according to the University of Scranton in the United States, in the state of New York, most people who set New Year's resolutions fail them within the first 2 weeks. So you've got about a week and a half left. Only 8% of people who set them will actually achieve their resolutions, and 88% of New Year's resolutions fail within that first 2 weeks. Now, most of the time, this isn't a result of laziness or fatigue, but purpose. Most New Year's resolutions are aimed at the surface of life, not the depths. They aim to treat the symptoms of life, the individual activities. They address habits rather than direction. They address action rather than meaning. And because of this, they fail for the following reasons. First, they fail because motivation will fade. You can think of a lot of New Year's resolutions that rely almost solely on your own personal motivation. Example, you might set a target at the gym. You might go, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to lose 15 kilos because I want to look better. I want to feel better about myself. But once you lose 10 kilos, you might be looking pretty good. And the 5 doesn't end up happening. Your motivation will fade, and you end up probably gaining those 10 kilos back. Or you might find that purpose is missing. I've seen one, which is read 12 books a year. 1 a month. That's a good one. I don't read enough. But every single place that I've seen that New Year's resolution, they've just said, I just want to read 12 books a year because I want to. And it's like, well, you might want to, but what's your purpose? What are you aiming to get out of it? And once you read the first book and it was rubbish, and then you pick up another one and it was also rubbish, then you're going to stop because your purpose is missing. You're not actually meeting your purpose. There's no tangible benefit there. Because improvement without a goal often feels meaningless and frustrating. At work, you might be 15% more efficient this year than you were before. But if there's no tangible effects for that efficiency, like that work might be not recognised, you might not get a promotion, or if that doesn't correspond with more benefits, that efficiency will soon dry up. Because you see, without foundation or action, foundation for your action, change rarely lasts. Without a goal in sight, a meaningful, deep, realistic goal, the change may work for a time, but it will ultimately reverse. You might put all that effort into becoming more efficient at work, but you'll end up returning to your previous state if nothing comes about from it. And this may feel like a modern problem. But this same concept is once again discussed in the Bible. Let's investigate a different perspective on human planning and start now to see where the Bible can lead us in making our goals. So Jesus Christ again asks a question. This question is one that is still asked today. For what is a man profited? What benefit is there if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Jesus asks the pertinent question: is there value in gaining the whole world if, in the end, we do pass away? And this is the same question we ask when we look to the year and the years ahead. And here is where the Bible offers its suggestion. It gives a couple of pieces of wisdom through these two quotes on the screen. Jeremiah 10:23 first. O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. Proverbs 19:21. There are many devices in a man's heart, nevertheless the counsel of the Lord, that shall stand. Jeremiah first suggests that ultimately man has a very limited ability to direct his steps or to define his ways. Proverbs adds to this when it says that there are many devices or intentions, plans or goals in our hearts. We think up many things that we plan out, but these plans and thoughts often don't work out in the way that we want them to. We can't see the future. We don't know what is in store for us. We have a very limited vision. The implication here is that God is the one that can ultimately holds the wisdom enough to properly backbone our resolutions. From Proverbs, the counsel, the wisdom of God, that's the only thing that will stand the test of time. So why then might our resolutions be failing? Could there be a greater purpose that we can define our resolutions by? The Bible offers one suggestion. Rather than look to our own devices in our hearts to plan our future, let's now look to the counsel of God. Let's look into the wisdom of the Bible to plan our futures around that time instead. So, this brings us all the way around to the title of our lecture, Redeeming the Time. How should we spend the year ahead? So let's start by understanding what it means in Ephesians 5 when it says redeeming the time. If you'll all turn back to Ephesians 5, it may all still be there. You can see it mentioned there in verse 16 that we had read out for us, redeeming the time. When it says redeeming the time, we can understand that as making the best use of our time. Just as we were discussing earlier this evening, time is incredibly valuable. The Bible treats time as a precious resource, limited but worth using purposefully. Time is irreversible. Time slips past us, often without us even noticing that it's gone. And if you're anything like me, you might find yourself spending your time rather than investing in it. This is truly what redeeming your time means. It has connotations of rescuing your time, saving your time, using your time in a way that will be best for your future. And you see, this whole section of the Bible in Ephesians 5 that we had read out there is talking about how we spend our time. Just like when discussing resolutions, we might find our lives busy, a time filled up, but life is more than just filling up our time. It is about direction and it is about purpose. And again, to emphasize from earlier, busily spending our time does not equal wisdom. It does not equal fulfillment. And in that way, the Bible doesn't aim to schedule our lives. God, through his word, doesn't give us a day-to-day timeline and a direct plan of action for every single year of our lives. Instead, his words give us what we really need, and that is direction. Now, of course, he gives us actions to follow. He gives us commandments, but more importantly, he gives us goals and reasons and principles behind those actions. And look at the start of this chapter here in chapter 5. This chapter is about all of our lives. Verse 1 and 2 talks about following God. Talks about walking in love, just as Christ loved us. This is the goal. Not an action per se, but a direction. Verse 3 to 7, that section, talks through all the wasteful and wrong ways to spend our time. These things that are considered to be evil and sinful activities. Even just in verse 4, the foolish talking and the jesting. Just straight up being silly. It's a waste of our time, and it's not a positive inclusion into our lives. Verse 8 to 14, though, you see it goes back to the positive. It talks about walking as children of the light, living our lives in the right way, in the way that God asks us to live, to fill our time with good and positive activities. It talks about being thankful. It talks about being grateful. And finally, it leads us all the way to verse 15 and 17, up on the slide here. 15 to 17, where it says, "See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is." And here is the real focal point. Paul, the writer of this letter of Ephesians, he states very clearly how we should be spending our time. He narrows it down to a couple of clear sentences right here in this section. He says to walk circumspectly. He says not to walk as fools, but to walk as wise. He says to redeem the time. He repeats, be not unwise. And finally he says, understand what the will of the Lord is. Firstly, walking circumspectly. When it says to walk, that means to live. Our life is like a walk, a journey. So we must live and act circumspectly. And circumspectly means carefully, warily, attentively. It means in this case to not act rashly, to live our lives purposefully, carefully, and intentionally. If we don't walk intentionally, we'll end up falling snare of what it says in verse 16 there, because the days are evil. If we don't intentionally redeem our time, or use our time circumspectly and carefully, we'll likely fall back into doing all of those things which are wasteful and wrong. Bad ways of spending our time, like the chapter talked about earlier, things that we used to do. Not to be living in anxiety of doing the wrong things, but living warily, knowing that without circumspection, we may very easily fall back into those bad habits. And what should we do? What should we intentionally, circumspectly do? Well, we should intentionally be wise and not foolish. And the Bible reframes this as an opportunity, not as a burden. It shows our lives as an opportunity to live with intent, to live with wisdom. And what is wisdom? Well, this passage also gives us the answer to that. Verse 17, it repeats, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. When it says the will of the Lord, will of the God, it means his purpose, his plan, and his direction. So let's summarize Ephesians 5 up until now. Just make sure we understand what this passage is trying to convey. First, the passage instructs us to live in a way that is good before God. Not to live as we used to in those wasteful and evil things that we usually spend our time. It instructs us to walk circumspectly and to live wisely. And finally, it tells us that wisdom, true wisdom, biblical wisdom, is to understand what the will of the Lord is. God's will is not fortune-telling. It's not career micromanagement or day-to-day calendar planning. Understanding God's will doesn't mean understanding what God plans for every moment of our lives. Understanding God's will is about understanding God's direction, God's plan, God's future that he has planned. And the Bible gives time meaning by giving life meaning. And it does so because the Bible is the only place where we can find the words of God. The Bible is the only place to find the will of God, the plan of God. True wisdom, says verse 17, the whole of Ephesus 5 we've looked at, or is to know what God's plan is for us. And not only that, to redeem our time, to live circumspectly and wisely, knowing God's will and how he wants us to live. Earlier we touched on the words of Solomon in Ecclesiastes, where he said God had set eternity in our hearts. Through Ecclesiastes, Solomon describes how he really tried everything. He did everything he possibly could to find meaning. He lived life to the fullest. He brought himself low. He tried everything. And Solomon concludes Ecclesiastes with a very resounding statement in the context of what we're looking at tonight. He says, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." Solomon's conclusion, after looking at the shared human experience and observing and participating in every possible activity, he came to the end and said, what is the whole duty of man? What is our duty? What should we plan our life around? How should we redeem our time? How should we spend our time wisely? Fear God and keep his commandments. Understand the will of God and live like that. Fear God doesn't mean to be afraid in that sense, but to be utterly reverent, to respect God and to take him seriously. So the question then remains, will you commit to learning God's will? Will you commit to understand what the will of God is, to live wisely? And before we answer that question, there remains one final question we need to answer, and that is not the why, but the how. How do we understand the will of God? How do we learn about God's will? And so this brings us to the final section of our lecture tonight, about a different kind of New Year's resolution. And it's really about the heart of what we've been building towards all evening. We've spoken about time, how quickly it passes, how easy it's filled, and how often it's spent without a clear direction. We've spoken about reflection, about resolutions, about why so many of them fail. We've seen that the Bible urges us not to simply be busy, but to be wise. Not simply to plan, but to understand the will of God. So the question now becomes a very simple one. If we're going to resolve to improve our lives, what is the most worthwhile place to begin? Each year, many of us resolve to improve ourselves physically, to eat better, exercise more, to take better care of our bodies. Others focus on mental and emotional health, reducing stress, finding balance, being more present. Some aim for financial improvement, greater security, better work, more stability. None of these things are wrong. In fact, many of them are good and beneficial. But they all share something, and that is that they are temporary. Our physical strength fades. Our financial circumstances change. Our emotional state rises and falls as much as we'd like to change it. Even at their very best, these improvements are limited to this life, to this moment in time. And the Bible does not dismiss these things, but it asks us to lift our eyes higher. It draws our attention to something deeper, to knowing God himself. And remarkably, it presents this not as an abstract idea, but as the very definition of life. Jesus says in John 17 verse 3, This is life eternal, that they may know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. Notice what Jesus does not say. He does not say that eternal life is found in rituals and traditions or in blind belief. He says that it is found in knowing God, in learning who he is and what he is like and what he purposes to do. And that is why reading the Bible matters. The Bible is not merely a religious book. It is presented as God's own explanation of himself, his character, his purpose, and his plan for the future. And through it, God reveals not only where humanity has gone wrong, but where he is leading the world and how individuals like you and I can be a part of that future. The Apostle Paul writes that all Scripture, all of the Bible, is given by inspiration of God. And it's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, to live our lives righteously. And just one verse earlier, he says, the Holy Scriptures that are able to make thee wise unto salvation. Earlier tonight, we spoke about wisdom, about walking wisely, about redeeming the time and understanding the will of the Lord. Here we are told where that wisdom is found, not in guesswork, not in trends, not in trial and error each year trying again, but in the Scripture, in the Bible. And importantly, the Bible never asks you to accept my words blindly. See, in Acts chapter 17, we read about a group of people called the Bereans. When they heard the message of the apostles, we're told, these Bereans were more noble in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the Scriptures daily, whether those things were so. They listened openly, but they tested what they'd heard. They examined and read the Scriptures for themselves. The Bible commends this attitude. It invites investigation. It encourages questioning. And it welcomes honest self-examination. This is crucial to understand. Living like God asks us to, as presented in his words in the Bible, is not about switching your brain off and just doing what it says. It's about engaging your mind, examining the biblical evidence, and coming to understand God through his revealed word. And when we do that, when we begin to read ourselves, even slowly, something starts to change. The Bible reshapes perspective. It helps us see that our lives are not random events, but they're part of a bigger story. It gives a purpose beyond survival and success each year. It explains why the world is broken. And it explains what God is doing to restore it. It prepares us for the future that God promises, a future beyond decay, beyond injustice, beyond death itself. Peter writes what God has given us, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature. And these promises are not discovered accidentally. They are learned and they are understood and they are found in the Scripture. Perhaps the most encouraging thing is this: the commitment each year does not have to be enormously large to be enormously meaningful. A resolution to read the Bible does not mean a resolution to understand everything about the Bible at once. It does not mean reading for hours every single day. It can begin small. A few verses, a chapter, a few minutes of intentional reading. But even small commitments, when sustained, can completely change direction. And Jesus illustrates this when he says, another parable he put forth to them, and saying, the kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took, and he sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, is the greatest among all the herbs, and becomes a tree so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Reading the Bible can start small, but as long as you continue and commit to reading it, growth is guaranteed. The more that you read the words of God, the more you can find out who God is. Direction matters more than speed. Reading the Bible, learning who God is, sets a direction that no other resolution can match. The psalmist puts it simply, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." The quote is so good that I had to highlight the whole thing. Here the psalmist writes that God's words are a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. The lamp shows the next steps, the next few steps that are awaiting the feet, so that we know the direction we're heading. The light shows the path. God's words show the rest of the path, the goal that you're heading towards. So tonight the invitation is not to make a grand promise or a dramatic change. It is simply this: if we are going to resolve to improve our mortal lives, why not begin with one thing that lasts beyond them? God promises a future to those who follow him, a future of immortality, eternity, peace and joy in his kingdom. You don't need to abandon your other resolutions. All the Bible is asking us to consider is to add one more that addresses all of our life. Reading the Bible doesn't need to be a daunting task either. There are many beginner's guides to reading the Bible. Christadelphians have used for a long time a guide which gives 3 chapters a day to read, about 20 to 30 minutes of reading a day, and can get you through the whole Bible a year. If you feel you want to take it slower, perhaps start with the book of Mark. It goes through the story of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Test the Bible and read it for yourself. Ask what it says about God, about humanity, about the future. See whether it speaks truthfully to your experience of life. Because if it is not what it claims to be, the Word of God, because if it is what it claims to be, the Word of God, then it is the most worthwhile use of our time that any of us could make. And in doing so, we may find that we're not just redeeming the year ahead, but redeeming our lives. 1 year from now, you will have spent your time on something. The question is, will you know God better than you do now?